think we're going to start now.
Pardon me?
And I just wanted to spend 20 seconds as the director of the library just welcoming you all here. We love it when events like this take place in Darien, and we're always happy when they take place at the library. We hope that when people are addressing the community's questions, issues, and problems, that they'll think that the path to solution in part leads through the library. So we're glad to have the League of Women Voters here, and I think Susan is next.
Good evening. My name is Susan Vogel, and along with Liz Mao, I am a co-chair of the League of Women Voters Program Committee. I want to thank the Darien Library for the use of the community room for tonight's event. And I don't know if we have to do this, but I'm going to point out the emergency exits in case there's an emergency. Hopefully there will not be one.
Put your oxygen mask on.
Put your oxygen mask on first before you help others. Also, please be advised that Channel 79 is taping our program this evening, and it will air at a later date. On behalf of the League of Women Voters, I welcome you to Elected Officials Night. This evening, our local officials will provide an update on projects and initiatives underway and discuss challenges and opportunities facing our town. Each of our panelists will have 10 minutes to speak. At the conclusion of our formal remarks, there will be a question and answer period. There are index cards available for your questions that will be handed out throughout the evening by members of the League of Women Voters. And you can submit your question and we will collect them and it will be asked. Tonight we are pleased to have our first selectman, Jamie Stevenson, chairman of the board, oh go ahead, the chairman of the Board of Education, Tara Ockman, chairman of the Board of Finance, John Zagrodsky, representing the Planning and Zoning Commission in Chairman John Zini's absence is Vice Chairman Peter Ovigny. Stephen Ovigny. And Seth Morton, who's the moderator of the Darien Representative Town. So thank you, panelists, for being here tonight. We're going to start with Jamie and then Tara. So everyone remember your order. Jamie, Tara, John, Stephen, Seth. And then we'll do questions and answers. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Susan, and thanks so much to the League for providing this annual opportunity for us to update you. Truth be told, I feel like we've sort of been in your lives a lot over the last few months, starting with the State of the Town address and then with all of the budget hearings. But I'm very happy to be here to give you an overview of the work that the Board of Selectmen and I have been doing over the last number of months. And I want to give you a little bit of a glimpse of things to come for over the next year that I think you'll find important. I'm actually really eager to get some feedback from you tonight too. So if maybe through your questions, or I'll try and go fast so maybe I have a little time left, but it's most important for us to not do our work in a vacuum and to hear from you the things that are top of mind and high priorities for you and our community as a whole. So as you know, we are in the throes of the budget process, and I'm certainly not going to take any of John's thunder this evening. The budget is in the capable hands of the Board of Finance. The Board of Selectmen, sort of high level on our budget, we put forward what I consider to be a very service neutral budget. We didn't make any programmatic additions, nor did we cut any programs from the Board of Selectmen's and the town's plate of services, with two notable exceptions. We're asking for an additional laborer in our Parks and Recreation Department, and that's really to help offset the increased workload now that we have Highland Farms and we're improving the Short Lane property. And we might be doing some improvements to the Diller property near the Darien High School. We also asked to continue the hiring of civilian dispatchers at our police department. And we did that for several reasons. Number one, civilian professional telecommunicators provide a better level of dispatch service And it's a much better use of our sworn officer time to be out on the road patrolling and doing law enforcement rather than sitting at the communications desk. But in addition, and probably even more important to me, and I think to some of my board members as well, hiring these 3 civilian dispatchers will allow for a redeployment of sworn officer staff to provide an SRO at the Middlesex Middle School and to provide a dedicated narcotics officer. And some people might question, why do we need a narcotics officer? Law enforcement necessarily has to keep their work close to the vest, but I can assure you that not only in the town of Darien, but in the surrounding communities, and because we are located along the I-95 and Merritt Parkway corridor, we have significant issues in this region with drug enforcement and drug activity. So we're hoping that the Board of Finance will support those requests, and that's really our rationale for that. What's been taking up a great deal of time from many of us is trying to keep pace with the legislation in Hartford. And I won't go into the detail of pieces of legislation, although I'm very happy to answer any detailed questions you might have in the Q&A. Essentially, we have a new governor. He's building relationships, getting the lay of the land, and has a monumental task ahead of him. He's a $2 billion budget this year, $3.2 billion deficit for next year. He's got to figure that out. He's got to figure out how to manage the long-term liability, pension, and healthcare crisis that we have. And one of the ways that we see that they're trying to get a better handle on state finances is through getting a handle on municipal finances, through the ideas of shared services, consolidated municipal services, and the like. So there is a whole host of legislation being proposed this year, some that may or may not affect our schools, some that affect town services in general, all in an attempt to, in theory, cut the cost of providing government services. So we're really only about halfway through the legislative process, and it remains to be seen where those pieces of legislation will land and what kind of impact they will have on the town of Darien. But we will make sure that we're very public and update all of you as we learn more about that. Seth, I'm sure, will talk about the pending ban of single-use plastic bags. There was a great public hearing last night. Really want to shout out to the kids in our community who continue to impress with how articulate they are, well-researched, and I really walked away thinking that the environment is theirs more so than ours. So really look to do the right thing for future generations without, however, negatively impacting our local business. And I know that the RTM is doing a really thoughtful job to try and balance those two interests. We're working through with our new blight ordinance. We've done tremendous work. We've helped many people in the town of Darien with the new legislation and the coordination with our Human Service Department. We're now down to a couple of issues that are really difficult blight issues, really difficult, and very problematic for neighbors. We might be coming back to the RTM to make some modifications of the blight ordinance so that we can streamline it and really get to the meat of how we can help some of these property owners improve their properties in a quicker time frame. I want to give you a little bit of information about WestCog. I continue to be the chairman of the Western Connecticut Council of Governments. That's our 18-town regional planning organization. Within that, we have what's called the Metropolitan Planning Organization. Too many acronyms, of course. That's the organization within the COG that does all the transportation planning. I am the chairman of the Southwestern Transportation Planning Unit. And the things that we work on, we're updating the long-range transportation plan for our region. We're putting together a regional GIS service. And we're doing projects to do a parking demand study in southwestern Connecticut. And we're studying the bus route between Stamford and Norwalk, which includes Darien, to try and optimize bus route services and bus stops. I don't think that's been looked at perhaps ever, so very excited about that project. I sit on the board of the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. We're now 169 towns are members of that advocacy group. It's awesome. We work in a very bipartisan, nonpartisan way. And I will be seated as chairman of the Connecticut Interlocal Risk Management Agency next week. That's the municipal insurance agency. So we get to see a very wide breadth of municipal issues through the insurance angle, and I'm very honored to have been chosen as their chairman. Areas of focus for the next year or so, or maybe even longer. Continue our path to fiscal self-sufficiency. We're likely going to have to take on a portion of the cost of teacher pensions, and we have to figure out how to manage that in a way that doesn't overburden our local taxpayers. We're hoping that we get some mandate relief and have a seat at the table for negotiating those benefits going forward if we have to pick up a cost, but we won't know. That's all in the hands of the legislators. And to that end of fiscal self-sufficiency, we need to look in a really deep and honest way about shared services here within our own municipality. We've done that in a kind of a superficial way, but the state is now encouraging us to really make meaningful impact on how we can share services between the silos of local government and even share services with our neighbors. I support that wholeheartedly on a voluntary basis. And we want to try and continue to use technology to drive efficiencies in local government. One day it would be great if we're all out of a job and town hall can be digitized. And all you have to do is go online to take care of all of your government services. I don't think that will actually happen because we need great people who work in our human service department for that one-on-one connection. But there's so many other services that really can be achieved through the use of technology. We're going to continue to work on pedestrian safety. We have a great initiative, Sustainable Darien, where we are seeking certification to be a sustainable community. It extends well beyond the traditional ideas of recycling and changing your light bulbs to LED. It's sustainability in all aspects of your community, from health and wellness to housing to your public works infrastructure. And so we have a great group of people dedicated to moving us towards certification. I think it'll be a wonderful way to sort of help sell an economic development motivator for the town of Darien if we can prove our commitment to being sustainable. We're putting in new streetlights on Norotan Avenue. I'm going to be working hopefully with the Board of Education, continue to work with the Board of Education on school security. I know it's a really important issue for parents. I think that there are SROs at the high school, soon to be in the middle school, and we should have a conversation about our elementary schools. So to the extent that we can be helpful on the Board of Selectmen with that initiative, I welcome that. Working on noise abatement from the trains on the New Canaan branch line. There's some new technology available called wayside horns that I want to try and work with our representatives on. And we have to talk about how to use the Edgerton property that was the home of the former senior center. There's some interesting thoughts sort of percolating in my mind about that. And to that end, I'd love to get some feedback from folks in Darien on where they see the gaps in government service. Are there things that we should be doing that we aren't? But are there also things that we're doing that we shouldn't be? I always try and look at right-sizing local government. So you all can be very helpful to us to sort of answer those questions. That's a very broad overview. I think my 10 minutes are up. So thank you very much. I appreciate being here, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, I'll agree with Jamie that I hope you are not all tired of us. Is this on? I see lots of familiar faces, and I know regionalization has brought many of you out to town meetings, and so I appreciate hearing from you on the issue. I appreciate you taking all the time this busy budget season and legislative season to reach out and let us know your thoughts. It's been very informative as we have conversations. So don't get too tired of us. Still feel free to call, email, and come to events like this. So thank you to the League for putting it together. I think it really serves a great community value. I will tell you a little bit about our budget. We have, if you were watching our budget before, we have good news. We've lowered it even further. We're at about a 2% increase, which is our lowest increase over 6 years. And I really think that goes to a lot of the investments that the community of Darien has put in over the last 6 years are certainly starting to pay off. And it allows us to capture real kind of economies of scales. We're in the middle of a 3% teacher step increase, and yet we have a 2% overall increase. So, you know, and as a top level, that can start to show you where we're able to find efficiencies. We really do believe that our job is to support children and maintain the integrity of their programs, but also be fiscally responsible, realizing that public schools are really a public initiative, and that goes back to the taxpayers. So much like Jamie, if anyone has regionalization questions that are specific, I'm sure between the two of us, we're happy to answer them. I will tell you, inside of our budget this year, we do have some major initiatives. We are adding or requesting, Board of Finance and RTM, we're requesting the addition of a psychologist at each of our elementary schools. It has engendered much conversation. We really do feel that at this point the administration has made their case about the need, and certainly it is a different lens through which I was raised in education with reading, writing, and arithmetic. Schools really are responsible for children throughout the day and must receive them as they get them and meet all of those needs. And we are finding an increased need for a psychologist to deliver some of the needs we are feeling very pressing in the schools. And it's for the children who are in need of services, and quite frankly, the children who are also occupying and trying to learn within the same space. So I'm happy to answer questions on psychologists as we go through. Our department chairs are also one of our major initiatives. We have had great success with our department chairs at the high school. And for anyone who didn't know, a few years back we put in department chairs to kind of make sure, as the high school grew and we had so many classes and offerings, that there were people making sure that children were receiving an equity and experience throughout the grade levels. Finals and midterms look the same. It allows teachers creativity, but it certainly allows us to assess at the end of the year and make sure that everyone is having a very similar experience. And it's not, you know, this one teaches me that one teaches me this, where am I at the end of the day? So we are very thankful for our teachers to embracing that leadership, and for our department chairs for what they've done for our students. Which leads me to kind of often the overlooked items. If anyone pays attention, we do a lot of sports in Darien. We've got some great teams, and I'm often at the field cheering for all our teams. But there's sometimes some groups that don't get highlighted. So just some kind of fun facts. Our Quiz Bowl was 3rd in the nation this year. We had 53 of our authentic research students participate in the Southern Connecticut Science Fair, 13 of which earned top honors. We had 32 concerts, or we will. We've got a few more left this spring, with 2,139 students in both band and orchestra. It is the largest band and orchestra and chorus that we have seen ever. And so we're so excited to be attracting students to that. We are very excited that we have 4 candidates for the Presidential Scholar Program. We wish them well as they go through the process. We have 82 students recruited, that received the Seal of Biliteracy, which is a vigorous program and certainly speaks to their dedication and the foreign language department. And my guess is we start to really search back, and for Board of Ed members in the room, it's a preview of what I want to come. We will start to see the payoff of putting foreign language in our elementary schools. Now our students who are graduating and receiving such honors and really can go out into the world and embrace language rather than the little bit of Latin that I can still conjugate. So there's a lot of exciting things going on. If anyone doesn't know, we are in the middle of a superintendent search. We are very excited about the level of candidates we have applying, and I think it's a real credit to Darien, our value on education, and our in what we've invested as a community in education that we're receiving this kind of candidate pool. With that said, it is somewhat frustrating that we can't really tell you more because it is a confidential search, because none of these people is this their first gig. They are gainfully employed in many different places, and so as soon as we can have a more robust update, I would be happy to let you know. As Mrs. Stevenson mentioned, we are looking forward, if possible, to put an SRO into the middle school. We believe that it is appropriate for the environment there. We'll have to continue our conversation. I think we probably have some different feelings at the elementary school, but we certainly will engage those conversations with the town and would love to hear from parents on their thoughts. But try and make sure that we do what's educationally sound for children at the appropriate age levels. So I think it sounds like that's all, but we have 4,700 students, so every day is something new. I will say that we monitor our enrollment closely. Many districts see declining enrollments. We are not seeing that, which is a testament to the town of Darien and the fact that it is welcoming and open. But we watch that closely every year. And I won't steal, I don't know if anyone will talk about it tonight. Maybe I will steal someone's thunder. If I do, you can have it too. We are in the process of looking at building a new elementary school for one that is in much need of a new school. I was going to say repair, but we're replacement. Thank you, Seth. So as that process unfolds, we have delivered educational specifications to the town. The town has been great throughout the process and created a building committee for us, and so they are underway so that we can fully understand what that would mean to the town, and we'll bring that forward to the RTM for full consideration when it's ready. And I think that's probably not my 10 minutes, but that probably gives you enough if you have questions. So thank you all very much.
Good evening, everyone. I am limiting my comments to less than 2 hours. I don't think Okay. So as some have said, we are in the middle of the budget process for the town, and the order of worship on that is the major boards, Board of Selectmen, Board of Education, set and vote on their budgets. It then goes to the Board of Finance, which is where it is now. It'll then be picked up by the RTM, which is the final appropriating authority in town. That's where we'll end up with a finalized budget. Our process right now is we've been through one of our budget workshops. We've got a couple coming up next week, one more the following week, and by next Thursday, 2 weeks from today, I believe, we'll vote on that budget and the mill rate associated with that budget, and then it goes to the RTM for their review. In terms of some numbers this year, the budget as we have it before the Board of Education change that Tara just talked about saw a mill rate increase of about 4.29%. Savings that she's mentioning pertains to lower than expected health insurance rates of $569,000 in that zip code. And when you factor that in, it takes us down to a mill rate increase of about 3.86%. So these numbers do matter. It's nice to see the budget under 4% this year, especially given last year's essentially flat budget, but we are still in the middle of our process, and we're going to continue to take a close look at that. A few other things to mention. The grand list coming out of this valuation is down about $100 million. That's before we've completed the process of contesting valuations, which I believe is still ongoing. And so that grand list could fall even more. What that means is that you can have a level of spending that goes up, and the mill rate would go up slightly more, simply because you've got to mathematically fix that mill rate to cover your spending. And if it's against a lower grand list, then so be it. The good news is that we're not seeing the same problems that you've had in other towns, particularly New Canaan, where they've seen a bigger hit on their grand list than we have. In addition to all this, we recently approved a bonding resolution of about $4.2 million. The blended rate for that bond came in at 2.67%. The proceeds are being used for a variety of reasons, but the good news is that we are continuing to maintain our AAA credit rating, and it was a competitive auction. People want to buy debt from towns like this, and that's a good thing. And I think it's tremendous that we've been able to maintain the financial management of this town that's required to actually earn a credit rating like that. Tara mentioned the school that we're putting up. This is obviously the Oxbridge elementary school, if anybody's been over there lately or studied that at all, you know that it is really time to replace the school. We did think about fixing it or building around it or trying to do something like that. And I remember Michael Lynch, who runs facilities and a whole lot of other things for the Board of Education, described a story where he worked on a school in New York and they decided to preserve a small core of that school and build around it. And actually the repair and remediation on the small core cost more than the entire rest of the project itself. And so the decision to actually start over with Oxbridge is something that may seem counterintuitive, but is actually financially prudent. As they mentioned, we have a building committee set up for that. In a lapse of judgment, Jamie has appointed me to that building committee. But a lot of very other qualified people on the committee, and it's a great balance of talent for people who've worked in the construction industry, have a lot of town government experience, or just been around for a long time. So I think you can have a lot of confidence in the quality of that group that's thinking about this. The group is actually meeting tomorrow morning at 7:30 if anyone is so motivated to come see it. But it is very focused on trying to move this process forward. They're working on architect selection right now, and we will continue to make sure that this process unfolds expeditiously. One change that we're making, which we made with Public Works Garage, is that we don't want to prejudge what this is going to cost. We're not going to throw money away. But what I'd hate to see happen is that we come up with some speculative number in terms of what we think it's going to cost. We get the design work done and we get the cost estimates pulled together, and those numbers end up being higher than what we thought it was. In previous projects, that's created controversy because people look at the numbers and say, hey, that's not the number you promised earlier. So we're not going to prejudge that or try to forecast that. We're going to wait and let the professionals come in and say, based on our design specifications, to get a building that's going to be enduring into the future, this is what it's going to cost. One thing I want to avoid with this school is to make sure we don't have happen what's happened with the high school and with Tokenie, which is that we've approved hundreds of thousands of dollars in retrofits, classroom switchovers, all of this, because those buildings were under-engineered or value engineered. As part of the process, we ended up with less than what we really should have gotten when we put those buildings up. It's not going to happen with the Oxford Elementary School. So I applaud everyone's enthusiasm for this. The Board of Education came up with diligently prepared specifications for this building. This process is on track, and we're going to make sure we end up with something that everybody can be proud of. So I'm quite happy about that. I guess just a couple of long-term comments about the town as we see it from a financial standpoint. I guess one word I would use is capacity. Right? We have a lot of debt capacity in this town. We've paid down our debt from a maximum in the $95 million range following the high school and the Tokenie school. It's now in the $65 million zip code. And by paying that debt down, we've got the debt capacity we need to use to put this elementary school in place and still be at a prudent debt level and not one that creates alarm or concern among ratings agencies. We also just have a well-managed town. And I know it's easy to make a flippant comment like that, but over a very long time, we've been very careful with stuff that really matters. For example, not allowing our personnel growth to get out of hand either at the school or at the town level, which, as I've said publicly many times, is extremely expensive in the long run. We've been very careful not to underfund our long-term liabilities and pension obligations. So healthcare expense for our retirees and pensions. A lot of other towns have gotten in trouble by not properly funding that. This town has never actually deviated from the actuarially recommended contributions to those plans, and we can be proud of that. So we sit here as a town that these problems that we're all about to have to pay for at some level or another that emanate from the state, this town hasn't actually engaged in any of that foolishness. Very easy to do, but this town has not done that, and I think something, certainly as long as I'm in this position, that we'll continue to do. Jamie mentioned before that she really wants to hear from people. We don't like operating in a vacuum, and I absolutely hear from lots of people, and I think we should continue that. But I'm telling you right now that a lot of decisions and a lot of the work that we have to do is in a vacuum. Right? There are some things that your town officials have to sort through, decide, and think about that are arcane or too detailed, a little bit complicated, require some historical knowledge. It's just too hard to go through and have a real robust public dialogue about that. One of the great things about our town government, and I can say this about everyone except me that's seated up here, these are extremely high quality individuals who are really dedicated to this town. You'd be amazed at the level of knowledge that they have on all these details, the care and prudence that they take in their individual jobs. And from where I sit, it is quite impressive. You are well served by the folks that are sitting up here this evening, again, the executive. I just provide entertainment. So, but I would also say that this extends to the citizenry. I get cards occasionally, lots of emails, phone calls, and people just out on the street that ask thoughtful questions, right? I'm not just paraded for something silly. People in this town ask questions. They want to know what's going on. And to the extent that I get that feedback, having quality citizenry like that makes the job of your, hopefully, quality elected officials that much easier. So I would encourage everybody to continue to do that. You can be thankful that you live in a town with neighbors like we have. It's a great place to live, and it makes the job of running this town, I think, a lot easier. Finally, just a couple of words on the state. I've said publicly that this is an alarming time. I think we're at a moment when there could be a lot of things emanating from the state that affect a town like this in a serious way. My general view on things like this and on life in general, life as a broad matter, is that things are never as good or as bad as they seem. I suspect that's actually going to be with what's happening at the state level, and that anything imposed on us is not going to be something that's immediate and draconian, but rather something that's fairly long-term. That does not mean that we should take our eye off that ball, or that anyone in town should stop paying attention to these things. They are very serious, and they do have the potential for costing a lot of money. As I said recently also, I don't expect that to diminish our commitment to providing quality education or town services. My final comment would be that in my view, not just in the current budget cycle, but over the long term for both the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen, but they've made judicious choices about how we maintain our schools and the services that we provide. Again, there's nothing excessive. All of the decisions, whether it's programs, staff growth, or expenditures generally, in my view, have been made responsibly by those two boards, and we do take a very careful look at that. But why are we doing this? We all live here. This is the type of town we want to maintain. These schools are drivers of property values, secondarily and primarily, are the best way to educate our children for the future. We're going to maintain that no matter what the state of Connecticut does. So if I come back to you and say, well, things are getting a little expensive, I'm going to be very clear about what the town and the Board of Education are spending and what the expenditures are that are being imposed by the state. So even though you may have to pay bigger bills going forward, you're going to know who to call for each component of that bill. And I can assure you that any foolishness is not going to be generated by the state. So appreciate everyone coming, and I look forward later to your questions. Thank you.
Well, today is a great day. The Yankees won, the Mets won, and it's a first day pick. I also started this morning with the same exact people at 8 o'clock, so we're going to start and finish where we finished and start where we left off. The only other thing I want to add to John's speech, he is really smart. I met him probably 15 years ago in an interview. He was the smartest guy I ever met at the time.
It's a paid endorsement.
It is a paid endorsement. I have a new client that bought one of the largest office parks in Stanford in the last year, and I met the guy the other day, and he goes, "Oh, you're from Darien, you know a guy named John Zabrowski." I said, "Yeah, I do." And he goes, "That guy's really smart." So,
thank you. One of your compliments.
thank you. My name is Stephen Ovatti. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission. I've been on the Planning and Zoning Commission, I think, for about 7 years. My predecessor, Chairman Boss, Joe Spain, is also in the room tonight, so thank you, Joe, for coming. We are a 6-person board of people. I've been in the commercial real estate business for 30 years, and I've lived in Darien for about 20 years. So I've seen a lot of changes in our town, and in my personal business practice as a real estate guy, I've always been into urban renewal and suburban renewal, so to speak. On our board, we have we have a bond trader, we have a realtor, we have a stay-at-home mom, and we have a grandfather that has a lot of kids and grandkids in town. The one thing that I like about our board is that we don't have any money. We don't have any budgets, we don't spend any money, we just approve stuff. And I like to see that we are the stewards of the grand list. The grand list is subject to market forces, which John talked about, which is values of the homes. But where our position, where we sit, is Again, it's urban, it's renewal of properties and turnover of properties. We look at, I don't have the exact count, but we look at hundreds of applications a year for new buildings. Majority of them are approved in some way, shape, or form. We meet, I think we have 36 meetings a year, and we take 2 months off, so it's about 1 meeting a week for our board. In the last couple of years ago, we started, and everybody saw it, we started and completed the town plan of conservation and development redraft. It was finished in 2016. As part of 2016's draft, we had an action plan at the end of it, was to review our zoning code. Right now, we are reviewing the zoning code of what we have in town and try to make it more user-friendly for people to read it, and also combine some of the districts together. Like, for example, there's a service business east and there's a service business west. Why it was done like that at one point in time in the town of Darien, I don't really know. They both pretty much say the same thing, but each one is tweaked a little bit different for the reasons. We're trying to simplify that and make it easier to take the best of both sides. Like I said earlier, I've been in the commercial real estate business for 30 years. I look at zoning code every single day as a part of my business. There's a lot of stuff that's simpler. Ours is complicated, but the people that work it in our town hall building in themselves, and the lawyers that represent a lot of applications, and the people on our board that work very well. The things that I want to kind of talk about is I've, a list of a million things that are going on in town. I don't want to bore everybody with things like that. I kind of want to touch a little bit on the highlights of what are happening in town. We do look at public projects, we look at commercial projects, and we look at town projects and a lot of residential projects. In terms of the town stuff, the thing that comes before our board is going to come up in front of our board. We look to the horizon and we look to the stuff that has been past us. So in the past, for Parks and Recreation in town, we looked at Oxbridge. We went through that whole property, now it's called Pilot Farm. That went through a significant review, and hopefully someday we're going to have a great public park there that everybody can use. At the beaches going forward, also in the town thing, on the Parks and Recs, in a couple of years, or maybe a year or so, we're going to be looking at the Pear Tree Point Beach program. A lot of the stuff that you see is in the newspapers. We have not seen any applications like that, but if you see the newspapers with regards to building permits and whatnot, eventually it's going to come to our board. In terms of schools, last year we approved a new Finch school that's in town. That was at one point in time in its life, it was here in the library. Then it was supposed to go to another building on the Post Road. Now it's inside the Thorndale Circle office park. I think that's a great addition to the town. We're supposed to tour it next week as a finished project, but those are some of the items that we look at. In terms of transportation, the Norotan Heights train station, as everybody drives past there, had a lot of the platforms are redone. There's additional things that are going to be going on there. We have not seen any of those projects yet, but James Stevenson, the first lieutenant, is working hand in hand with the state and the MTA to do that to improve commuter traffic for town. With regards to train transportation, some people here may know, some people may not know. The city of Stamford finished their urban transit way a couple of years back. As part of the urban transit way, they're supposed to put another train station at the middle of East Main Street at the top of McGee Avenue. That will take some pressure off of Darien if you live down by the YMCA. It lands up being on the Buchanan line, but that's another train station that's going to be coming into town. If you go up and down the highway, you see all of the new clover leaves that are going on in Stamford and in Rye. We'll also have a bridge being built in Darien, which we approved, which is the separation between Darien and Stamford. The next thing that I have on my list is the residential market. The residential market in Darien, from where we sit, is very strong. I work regionally, like I told you. A lot of my work is in Fairfield County, Connecticut, and Hudson Valley. Our taxes here are half for the same valued house than any town that's near here. Okay, so when you talk about taxes in town, our taxes for a house that's $1 million here I am is probably about $9,000 a year. If you put that same house in Westchester County or Long Island, New Jersey, it's about double that. I think we should all be proud of something like that, and that's one of the reasons why people do move to this town. I live in a very young neighborhood. People come to Darien for the real estate that's here, for the things that we've done for the town, and for the quality of housing here. So I don't think there's a lot of worry to be there about real estate values and whatnot. John did allude to the fact that the grand list got smaller. That's due to market forces. People's houses prices go up and down, but there's not really a market from where we sit at all. The other thing that I want to get into is some of the projects that are in town that are going on. Everybody knows about the three big projects that we talk about: the Carbon Drive project, the Federal project, which is Stop and Shop, and where Walgreens and Equinox is, and then the third project that's on the horizon is the Palmer Supermarket Center. I'm going to leave those three to last and leave that open for questions and answering at the end. But if you drive through around town, one of the most active parts of town right now, if you ask me, is the east side. Over on the east side, you have an office park that was empty for years. It was purchased by a local developer. The whole entire office park is under construction. It's about 120,000 square feet. It's called Darien Green. It's next to Dutchess. That project will probably come online in about a year from now and bring a lot of new jobs and people in town once they lease up the project. In front of that project is another building, which is the old sewing machine project. That building's under construction. We've already approved some of the tenants that are going in there. That's going to complement that end of town also and bring some more services in there. They may want to bring in some kind of restaurant and food service in there. We'll see. It hasn't been approved yet. We're going to approve some of the other items in town. A couple of years back, we approved the west side of town, closer to Stanford, where Mr. Vaccaro was a developer. He bought that a small old house, and then another building next door. That's where today you have Roost, Danny's Bicycle Shop, and Johnny's Hair Cutter. That project is a fantastic project that we approved a couple years back. Those are the two opposite ends of town. In the middle of town, that's kind of important to me, is where we have the brand new Parklands project that's opened up, the Sykes Woods project. That is a 101 assisted living units that is supposed to widen the possibilities of people to live in town and stay in town. A couple of years back, we approved Atria's expansion. Atria expansion's done. I think Atria has 83 units. That project's basically full. Maplewood is the third one in town. That project also, they bought a building next door to them. They have plans to do an expansion that we approved a couple of years ago to buy the building next door, and we'll see if that thing breaks ground pretty soon. Along the same lines in that same neighborhood, as part of the Corbin project, at the end of East Lane, which is across the street from Parklands, Mr. Jed recently and Big Wood Properties is planning another. It's a special needs house that's going to be back in there, similar to what's over at the cottage by Edgerton School. That project will probably not break ground until the Corbin Project Drive project starts. In the center of town, I like to say that our town has barriers of entry, but flexible barriers of entry. One of the things that I'm going to try to advocate for it soon is behind the new Brooks Brothers and behind Blue Mercury, we have that new pocket full of stuff. To me, I want to rename that the new Little Arthur Avenue. There's a butcher, there's a fish guy, now there's a bread guy, and there's going to be new restaurants that's going to finish it out. That's going to be that restaurant's not approved yet. The two Swell Brewing property is going to be there. I think it's a great little addition to town. And when I was talking about, when I was listening on the radio back around Christmas, everyone's going to Arthur Avenue to get their stuff. I'm like, we have all those little things in our town. We're flexible, and we will. I think under my watch, we probably approved or changed to get approved many of the business activities. Moving on, relative to the big, large projects, The three things we spoke about were the Corbin Drive project in the center of town, which is the Bank of America building all the way to Gopher Ice Cream, which it flips over Corbin Drive. That's one of them. That project was approved by us in Thanksgiving of 2018. Right now, they're up at the state level, getting other approvals for the state level, because they're adding a number of parking spaces to the site, and it's not a state road, so the state has to sign off on it. Mr. Genovese has got a fantastic, WeWork Properties has a fantastic engineers and staff and consultants that work for them. So their project is going to keep going through the process, but it takes a lot of time. Also, as John alluded to earlier, relative to building schools and beaches and Ox Ridge and the Highland, all this stuff takes a lot of money to build it. These projects that are being built are very, very expensive. The construction financing market is going to weigh in on all these things. And each one of the developers, absent maybe Federal Realty, does have to go through construction funding, which is all private funding. Moving on to another one, the Palmer's application. We approved the Palmer's application in, I'm going to say, the summer of 2017. It might have been the winter of 2017. They already came in for an extension of their project. If you go by the Palmer Shopping Center, which is next to the store, the majority of those tenants have relocated out. Many of them found new homes. There's a couple that are still left there. They're also going through a little more design and construction financing needs that they're going to have. The one thing that you are going to probably see in the near future is the post office. That's probably going to move. That, to my knowledge, is supposed to move to underneath the Palmer store where Infinity Fitness is, and then there's also a physical therapy down there, so you're not losing the post office. With regards to the federal project, the federal project is kind of sort of started off. Equinox was re-skinned on the outside recently. Equinox is doing a interior renovation now. Not much is going to change with Equinox at all, but in the area between Equinox and Walgreens is where the new Walgreens is going to go. So the next process there is the new Walgreens is going to be built in the parking lot, and then they can start to do the rest of the project. In other town projects related to that, there's the road widening that's going on that's going to happen over in the Roden Heights area. As part of that project and as part of the federal project, and Jamie can allude to this a little more later if she wants to, there's the piece of land that's between the depot building and the train station. That is going to help us with the flooding when the town and state and federal gets together. Part of federal's project is to help with the flooding on the road, on Heights Road, and that's another big project that's going to happen as part of that. That's pretty much a lot of the stuff that we have that's going on in my department or my commission. There's a ton more. We are a very dedicated board that look at this stuff. Everyone reads all the applications, and it takes a little bit of time, but I can tell you that your process and your properties and what we do, I think you're all in pretty good hands. Thank you.
Last but not least, huh? I'm Seth Morton, and I am the moderator of the representative town meeting. You don't see lawn signs around for moderator of the representative town meeting. To become a moderator, you have to first get elected from your district, and then somebody in the RTM has to nominate you, and then you have to get elected for one term, 1 year. Every year, you're up for renewal. It's a great body, and it's a great way to run a town. Anything that goes on that requires spending money in this town winds up in the RTM to get approved. So it's a big job. There are 100 members, and so to give you a feel for that, look around at this group that's here tonight, look at the depth and the breadth and the different kinds of people who are here, and then multiply it by 2. And that represents, that gives you an idea of the size and the depth of the representative town meeting, and why things run so well in this town, because there are a lot of people involved in it. As the moderator, I'm also chair of the Rules Committee. And the Rules Committee sets the agenda for the representative town meeting. We also assign people to the working committees that are in the RTM. And then we also assign projects. So for those of you who have heard about the bag ordinance a little bit earlier, the Rules Committee made a decision about which working committees of the RTM were going to be involved with it. There are 7 committees, working committees with about 13 people on each one. Town government and structure, that's more or less the folks who write changes to ordinances or write legal, the legalese for the items which are passed by the RTM. They do it in conjunction with town council, and they have the bag ordinance. They got to sign that as part of it. We have the education committee. Tara would know who they are. She probably knows their first names, last names, and quite a bit about them, because they're there 12 months a year. The committees, the working committees in the RTM have taken an increasingly more active role in interfacing with the key town boards, because we find that when items finally get on the floor of the RTM, a lot of major issues have been settled. And so it allows us to focus on maybe a few points, and allows us to pass legislation more easily. Then there's the Finance and Budget Committee, and they're just involved with anybody who wants to spend money. They're very active with John's board. John probably knows them all by name as well. The Finance and Budget Committee is divided into 2 parts. It has half of them deal with the education budget, and half of them deal with the Board of Selectmen's budget, more or less. So there are 2 vice chairs in Finance and Budget, and they one's for education, one's for the selectmen. Then we have Park and Rec. Not too much going on there, but from time to time something happens and comes before the RTM, and it would pass through that committee. Health and Social Services was assigned the bag ordinance by Rules Committee. Public Works is the lead on the bag ordinance. Monica McNally is in full force, and she's at the top of the stretch, headed for the finish line, I think. And then Planning, Zoning, and Housing, which would be interfacing with the Planning and Zoning Commission. Not a lot of money spent there, but there might be rules or whatever that would be changed, ordinances which might get changed, and so PZ&H would be involved there. The most important thing probably that the representative town meeting does is work on the town budget through the committee structure, and then ultimately put it on the floor and pass the budget every year in May. It takes a lot of work, not only working with the boards, but also making sure that members of the RTM are in touch with the community and put issues before the boards before they wind up on the floor of the RTM. With 100 people, if you have an issue that comes on the floor of the RTM, it's going to take a while to get that resolved. So we try and make sure our input is made very early in the game, so there are no surprises in the end. The RTM also passes ordinances, updates ordinances, and we also approve contracts. Any contracts that are negotiated between the town and the unions comes before the RTM for approval. So that gives you a pretty good feel for what we do. The RTM meets about 5 times a year unless we have to have special meetings for something that comes along that was unanticipated. But basically, that's how it goes. I get to run the RTM meetings. Been in the RTM 34 years. And it helps when you know most of the people there, because you can say, Ms. Jones, please, could we move on from this now? You know, can we kind of, it helps. So that gives you, I think, a feel for what it's all about. And I'm open to questions at the proper time. Bag ordinance, I would say that the bag ordinance is moving along. It has not been easy because there are some questions about how you enforce it and how you charge 10 cents. I don't think the 10-cent thing has been worked out yet, but I understand from Mrs. McNally, who called me from somewhere way out of town to tell me that it was in process, so we can all be assured it will get worked out. Thanks.
Well, thank you all. This was very informative, so thank you for being here tonight, and to all of our guests this evening. Does anyone else have questions? I have 3 on my hand. Gwen, do you have some? Yeah. Okay, well, you know, while we're still collecting them, let's get started. This is a really interesting question, and this one is for everyone. So, let's see.
No pressure to take that one.
If you did not have to consider costs, what would be the most innovative, transformative initiative the town could take on in the next 5 years? Do you want to go ahead, Peter Sleepovane?
I'd build a town pool. First thing I would do.
You just made a lot of parents fall in love with you, Steve. No, I don't know what to follow.
I talked earlier about the different towns that I work in across the region. Every single town that I've been to has either a pool at their high school or a pool that's open to the public. We are blessed having 3 country clubs in our town, and then 2 other clubs that have town pools. If you're not a member of a club or the YMCA, you don't have access to a pool. I think that's something that we are missing in this town, and I grew up in Garden City, Long Island. We had 3 pools. My daughter's a swimmer. She, always had to live someplace else. And I think that's one of the items that we're missing.
I'll pick up because it's it branches off of what Steve said. I think education has changed so much. It's transformative, and I think that there's so much great thinking, but often you are the bricks and mortar of it. Allow different things. So if there are unlimited funds, I think, the board would always love to look at facilities or innovations with inside classrooms and the use of technology to deliver certain services and to engage students. I think that we are very proud and blessed with our schools and our neighborhood schools, and so it's nothing against them, but I think if there was an unlimited check to be written, I think that we could find a lot of things to do in education that would be incredibly valuable and imaginative and creative and really help us reach all of our learners in a new way.
I have 3 things that are top of mind. I mentioned one earlier. I would fully digitize town hall government service. And I think the folks in Darien would be very well served by technology forward experience when you're trying to accomplish what you need to with local government. I would buy a fleet of energy efficient shuttle buses so that we could pick people up at the end of their roadways and deliver them to the train stations so that the folks didn't have to drive to the trains. And then I would buy Great Island I think it's still for sale.
I would vote for Great Island too, with the important caveat that we're talking about things we would do if it didn't matter how much money. I guess I'd make a potentially a contrarian point. It's actually very easy to think about how we spend a lot of money and sort of daydream about the lottery ticket. It's actually much harder to think about how we would do things more efficiently. The reality is, at least from where I sit, especially given all the pressures from the state, we're looking at potentially significant tax burdens for people here in town. And not everybody can afford to pay a lot of taxes. There's a lot of ordinary people, surprisingly as it may seem, that are potentially on fixed incomes or relying on the sale of their house at some point to support their retirement. There's a lot of people like that in town. And so trying to keep a balanced view on this when we're under pressure to spend money on schools and innovate as much as we can conceivably do without keeping in mind more ordinary citizens here in town, it's a really tough balancing act. So if I had a wish, it would be to figure out how to deliver a lot of the things that we come to expect in this town for a lot less money than we can do, or not for a lot more.
Okay, so Tara, I'm guessing this question is for you. Are there any plans to get rid of the portables at Holmes, Royal, and Henley?
Yes. Can I stop there? Yes, period. There is a lot. We certainly, that is a goal. It's been a stated goal of the Board of Education that these portables, which were fixes in some cases, have been on our school campuses for almost 30 years. So their temporariness is, it's hard to say that they are temporary anymore when they've been there that long. We've actually had to rehab portables. And to John's point, that just seems it does not seem to be efficient if we can. However, you know, that is a process and that is a commitment and it deserves to be studied. So our facilities committee has convened. We set some priorities. Oxbridge was in the greatest need, and so that was the first priority to bring forward to the town. We also wanted to combine our ELP program. We were able to meet both of those goals in the new plans for Oxbridge, and so we tried to be as efficient as we could with that. And now portables are our next facilities conversation. So my hat's off to the wonderful board members on the facilities committee because it is an arduous task, but it's certainly, it's a stated goal. It's, I think, a personal goal, and I don't think that there's any board member that would not love to see a fix to those. But it will take us time to figure out the right and most efficient fix for that. But I am proud that we are finally very focused on it.
Thank you. Jake, I think this question is for you. Why did replacing the basketball court at Cherry Lawn Park get cut from the budget? This isn't the first year this has happened. It's only one of 2 outdoor courts in town. It desperately needs to be redone.
So we agree. I think is Diana here? She was a big proponent of that on the Board of Finance. So there's a lot of activity going on in the world of parks and recreation, starting with the Parks Master Plan and the projects that fall from the Parks Master Plan, including the work that we're doing to reimagine the Pear Tree Beach property and how to incorporate the Short Lane property into the Weed Beach area, and the work that we're doing now that we've acquired Highland Farms. So like we hopefully do at home in town government, we set priorities on spending. And while it may seem like a relatively small spend in the scheme of the overall investments that we're making in the area of Parks and Rec, we had to make the hard decision along with the department head to wait on that project and to allow Parks and Rec to, in the context of their master plan, make sure that that basketball court should stay where it is, how it should be constructed. There's a new form of construction we used on the tennis courts called post-tension concrete. I believe we'd like to do that with the basketball court as well. But we want to make sure that we're putting it in the right place. And so we will support that project, just not this year.
Okay. John, Darien may be subject of increased costs from Hartford with the teacher's pension sharing and the loss of the auto tax. Is there a way to benchmark the impact on the mill rate? As an example, $1 million cost increases the mill rate by X.
Yes.
Would you care to explain how?
There's a follow-up question. So, look at a mill rate, I actually don't have it right here in front of me, but say it's 16.15 mils, just to pick a number. Each one of those numbers at the end, 16.15 or 6 or 7, each one of those numbers at the end is worth about $100,000 in spend. So I want to go through and kind of map all this out and think about that. You can take whatever's being imposed by the state, whatever we're spending here, whatever that is, take that $100,000 and then you can actually calculate that in terms of its impact on your mill rate. It's also, by the way, why when we're cutting spending, if we get down to the end and we say, gee, we cut that $23,000 project, the reality is that if we do that, doing so does not change the mill rate. It's not going to affect the taxes that you pay. It's got to be an expenditure that's $100,000 or more, or expenditures that total to that or more. So that's a good way to think of that.
Susan, can I expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely.
So I've already been working with our tax assessor department to put together some formulas based on the different components of the governor's bill that will have a direct impact on our grand list. There are several. There is the elimination of the local motor vehicle tax, which we charge 16.08 mils. What would replace the local motor vehicle tax would be a tax somewhere between 15 and 19 mils that you would send directly to Hartford. So that would leave a significant hole in our grand list for the motor vehicle component. There is also the proposal of adding 1 mil to your real property taxes. That again is a statewide tax that would go right to Hartford. That will have an impact on how much you would be taxed on your home. And then there's 2 other components, one that affects businesses and one that affects homeowners. One is a $50,000 homestead exemption for homeowners, and the other is a $25,000 personal property tax exemption for local businesses. So we're working on, and I have some information already that doesn't have the 1 mil, so I'm waiting for that, because the 1 mil is the largest tax impact to us locally. But we're going to have that formula, and we're going to show how it will impact homes at 3 different price points in the town of Darien, and we'll be happy to share that information. And one step further, once we know what these proposals are, we're going to build a formula that we're going to make public and put online, so you'll be able to plug your own home's value in and see the effects of the state mandates on you.
One other point to add to that, I think that one of the town hall sessions, someone posed a question, well, how much could state income taxes go up with all of these expenditures from Hartford? My guess is that you're not actually going to see all the impact from Hartford concentrated into a single measure. Right? It's not going to be just state income taxes. It's not going to be just a car tax. It's not going to be any of those things. And the reason they're doing that is because it's much easier politically to navigate the spreading of all this cost among all different kinds of things, because politically it's hard to get people riled up about it, right? You look at the one thing that's really got people upset right now in terms of potential costs, what is it? Tolls, right? Obvious, big gantry put up, tolls, right? That's going to cost me in terms of my commute. That's going to be a very hard sell in Connecticut because it's extremely visible and costs ordinary people a ton of money, very regressive tax. But the rest of these things, they're all spread out among all kinds of little things. It's one of the things I really like about what Jamie and the selectmen are doing with this model, is it's going to allow you to pull it all together in one spot and say, okay, you can spread it out among all these different things, but you can't hide, because we're going to put it on that form, put it into that model, and you'll be able to see what the impact is going to be on your personal tax situation in your house. So stay tuned for that. I think that's going to be very important. Well, don't lose sight of the fact that they're going to try to offload these taxes in a very diffuse way it's going to make it hard to look at any one change and say, well, is that really bad? No, it's when you add them all up that it's bad. And that's what Jamie's trying to cook up for the benefit of everybody here in town.
Okay, next question. Tara, I'm thinking this is for you. How do you feel about armed security guards in elementary schools like they have in Newtown?
So, I can tell you.
I guess anyone could answer that question too.
Does anyone want to go first? You want me to go first? I mean,
Be my guest.
I could tell you how I personally feel, which is the question, and so, but let me answer it this way. On this issue, which has been raised by a few people, and I don't say few casually, we really have only heard this issue from a few people. We've enjoyed 2 superintendents over the last 2 years where this question has come up, and both educationally have cautioned against it. We have close conversations with the chief of police, who also I don't think would be particularly supportive of SROs in all of our elementary schools. Armed security is slightly different. So we have not seen from any of the professionals who really look at this that they are recommending it for our schools. So I think that as a board, we really have to take into account the professionals who are giving us the advice about both the appropriateness for children, the data on it, and the real security impact that has. So it has not been a recommendation that has come to the Board of Education. And so, I would not expect that recommendation when we have a new superintendent, if he feels differently and wants to present us with evidence, and or if the police chief has a change of heart at some point. I think the board would be open to hearing that. But we take security very seriously. Every year our schools go through a review that includes recommendation from the police. And so I think, and we have invested a significant amount in security over the last few years. So I think that armed security guards sometimes make people feel that that's a great answer, but what I can assure you is the Board of Education takes security seriously, and if we heard evidence that that was necessary, it would be considered. And we've made lots of changes, but that's not one that we are considering at this time based on the information we have from the experts.
Okay, thank you. Is the Board of Finance working with the Board of Education on a comprehensive facilities plan for our schools? Taxpayers have little information about the progress to date and the extent of the dollars involved.
So there's a couple ways to look at that. One is the oversight and maintenance of our existing plant equipment, if you will, for schools, and then what to do about school replacement. So I kind of separate those two questions. I actually have a lot of confidence in Mike Lynch, who runs facilities for the Board of Education. I've known him for a long time. I've been on the school tours. I talk to him about how he thinks about things. And I think for me, the biggest measure of whether that's being properly run is the quality of people who are running it. And in this case, I think the superintendents in the past and the Board of Education has done an excellent job of picking the right person to manage and oversee all that. And so when you compare that against the budgets that we approve that the Board of Education supplies for the maintenance of the town facilities for schools, they do a very good job at that. We go by any of these schools, even the older schools, the maintenance and upkeep of that is meticulously done. They pay very close attention to the various components of that. They're constantly coming to us for things to renew and take a look at, or replace, or make more energy efficient. I mean, there's lists and lists of this stuff. They're paying very close attention to that. So on that side of the ledger, I actually have a lot of confidence that it's being managed well, both from what I see that's proposed in their budgets and by the quality of the people that are running it for the Board of Education. In terms of the big stuff, like schools, they don't come along that often. Of course, I say that. We had a high school in 05 and Topeka in 11, I guess, whenever that was finished, 10 or 11. Not that long ago. And so we've had 2 major school changes like that. This Oxford's change will be a big one. But after that, it should be some time before we see a wholesale school replacement. But the great thing is that whatever those decisions are, we've been very collaborative, not just the Board of Education, but with the Board of Selectmen and the process that Jamie put in place for establishing a building committee. I can tell you that has made a huge difference in the town, and we're definitely using that process to oversee the Oxbridge school construction. And so I think the answer is an emphatic yes. There is tremendous cooperation across all three boards in planning and thinking about this, but importantly in the execution of these projects. Go look at the Public Works Garage, on time, under budget, fantastic facility, and that was done with great collaboration between the building committee and the Board of Selectmen, and you're going to see the same thing for Oxford.
So I would just add, we do have a master's facility plan. We brought in an outside architect to look at all the schools. That also goes with our building conditions survey that was done a few years ago. And also Mike Lynch is our head of facilities who, as John said, does an excellent job. So I think the board looks at this. I think the board is mindful of both the environment our children are learning in and also the taxpayer. And so I would echo what John has said, and Oxford is probably the greatest example of it. We moved it forward to the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen put together a fantastic building committee, and they have been off and running. Certainly, Kip Coons is the chairman from the Board of Selectmen, and Duke Deneen, who's on the Board of Ed. And so, facilities are hard. They're hard, they're expensive, and to do it and do it right is really the right answer for the town. And so Oxford was one of those things that went through a long development period so that we could deliver something that the Board of Selectmen could act upon, such that a building committee could act upon. And I think that's what you'll see. And yes, I'm not forgetting, when it gets to the RTM, I'm sure there'll be full support from the RTM.
Well, in light of that, I might just say that it's a continuing process. You have tours of school every year, plus, given the RTM's involvement and all the other boards' involvement, there's a continuous review that goes on. And we've known about the need to do something about Oxbridge for a while. The question is timing. When do you have to step in and finally make the move and do it? And but the way that the budgeting process works, and also the way that the boards work, there's a continuous process that looks not only at the facilities in school, but the general facilities for the town as well.
John, this question is for you. Can you please discuss the total impact likely on the mill rate of current legislative tax proposals, such as the additional statewide property tax, required minimum wage of $15 per hour, school regionalization, required paid family leave, expansion of the sales tax to many services in addition to
That was definitely for John.
New fees. I don't know, there's a cat tax? Is that what
At 10 seconds.
Okay. Sorry.
The answer is 4. It's going to be expensive. I guess the editorial that I have on all this is that I've spent a lot of time reading not just these bills, but trying to study state of Connecticut finances. I've looked at all the stuff from CCM. I've looked at all the stuff from Yankee Institute. I've looked at a ton of stuff trying to get a clear, well-articulated view of not just where we're spending money today and where the tax revenue comes from, but where the problems are in terms of all these unfunded liabilities, just to get all that stuff clear in my mind. Right? Has anybody kind of mapped it out and said, this is what we got? And I've read a lot of this stuff, and I've not paid to pay attention to this stuff in this role. I can tell you right now, I can't say that I still have a complete, clear picture of this stuff and a view in my own mind as to where I would tackle everything. And so if you think about the question that was just posed, which is a serious and valid question, which is what the heck is all this going to cost? It's actually quite hard to come up with a true estimate of that. It's particularly worrying because when you look at all the things that we're trying to fund with all of this, we just don't really have a handle on what that is. Did you know that for OPEB, for the state, which are other post-employment benefits, that for the state of Connecticut, that no money was saved for any of those programs, and they've been in place for decades, any of those programs until 2009, I believe it is, when they first decided as a state they were going to start to set aside money for that. These are tens of millions of dollars in liabilities that ultimately the state is going to have to pay in one way or another. And so we try to get our minds around what all these things are going to cost and what the impact of that is. I still worry that we still don't have a handle on what it is we're trying to fund with all of that. And so that mismatch continues to cause concern for me. And it should be a concern for taxpayers in towns like ours.
I told you he was smart.
I'll make a comment too. So, as I mentioned before, we're going to make an attempt to quantify the impact on your tax bill from the things in that laundry list that you mentioned, Susan. But there are a number of things in that list that will affect us all personally that will be hard to quantify. But certainly I can tell you that 2 years from now, we're all going to know how the expansion of and the elimination of the exemptions on sales tax will affect us, how tolls will affect us. The cost of paid family medical leave may or may not have an impact on local government because in the legislation today, collective bargaining units can bargain to acquire that benefit. So while they won't enjoy that benefit from when the bill is approved, if bargaining units bargain for that benefit in the future, it will have to be reflected in the cost of the personnel services that are delivered to our town through our schools and through our local government employees. So it's very, very hard to quantify. But I think what is important to know is that the governor's proposal is a 2% increase over last year's spending. There are no spending cuts in the proposed budget. And as John said, the additions to government spending are going to be spread across a wide variety of cost centers and will hit us in very different ways. And hopefully they will all be able to manage that, you personally, us as a government, but time's going to tell on them.
One thing I would add is all these unfunded liabilities and underfunded pensions and no funds for any of that. Those obligations that can't be paid won't be. Don't forget that.
Does anyone have any other questions? That's so depressing. Well, to end on, oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
I've got a question. First of all, thank you for taking the time to come before us tonight. What amazes me that in a town of 22,000 people, 50 people show up. What can you do? What can we do to invigorate more involvement, other than when the crisis seems to hit and we fill up rooms with people all of a sudden worried because their ox is being gored?
Can I answer that first?
Yeah.
TV 7 and 9. I'm on the board of, I'm on the Planning and Zoning Commission. My father-in-law, who is 85 years old, knows more about what I do on the Planning and Zoning Commission than anybody. He's never been to a meeting. So I do applaud TV 79 for what they do. This is not a paid endorsement. But I understand your point. You know, it is always fun when the room's filled and there's standing room only. But I will tell you, I mean, some nights I can't sleep and I watch him on TV. Not sure about that. You know,
That's
so
not a paid endorsement.
But I do hear you. I will tell you, in some of our meetings on P&Z, you know, there's standing room only on the outside because everybody wants to speak. And we do move meetings into bigger venues. But I would argue that people don't really get involved because they do get involved. And I'm not a social media guy by any stretch of imagination. Some younger people are. And Tara Ackman would probably know more.
No, I'm so
Facebook.
bad at it. Don't call me out. I'm so bad at social media. I should be, but
But it's, to me, I think it's a waste of time. I would rather come to a meeting and listen. But that's my only answer to it. I do think people are engaged because when I see them on the cross field or on the football field, they go, "What are you doing with that thing?" I'm like, whoa. How'd you know that? Because you weren't coming to me. They know.
So I'll put a little bit of a positive spin on that. It used to really frustrate me when I started on the Board of Selectmen that, you know, we wouldn't get that many people coming to meetings and sending emails and things. I actually think that that's a sign that things are running pretty well locally. I can assure you that we hear loud and clear when things are not happening well and that there are threats to our quality of living. So we definitely look for all different kinds of avenues to reach out to people, and we're starting to be a little bit more forward thinking about that in local government. I completely concur. Channel 79 has really changed the dialogue around that for everybody, and really appreciate that very much. For anybody that wants a more regular update, we had our monthly operations planning committee meeting this morning at 8 o'clock. Once a month, we here at the table get together and have a high-level conversation about all the different things that are happening in our areas of interest. So every month you can get a snapshot of the things that we're all working on. So, and you can find those on demand on the Town of Darien website at the TV 79 location.
So I look at it from a little different slant, because Board of Ed meetings are full. We hear, as my husband says, people should really know not to call the house before 6 a.m. And I'm like, well, that's when their best thinking's happening, so they call. But to your point, I do think distilling the information, what I'm learning is people have short amounts of time. People are very busy. A lot of this is very complicated. If we can do our best to distill the information in an easily digestible way, such that people can pick and choose where their issues are, and then come to you and ask more. I think that's the challenge. I think the more that we can give the quick high-level update, and then someone say, wait a minute, that interests me, can you tell me more? And this is a great forum to do it, and it'd be great if this room was packed, but I think the challenge for all of the boards, and that is not impugning anybody's work, I think that the people up here do great work, is to try to make it as digestible as possible in a very fast-paced world where people are busy. But yes, our parent engagement is quite intense, but I take it as a credit. I think it means people value the schools in the town.
I might add, running for the representative town meeting is a great thing. If you want to get in, you want to get knowledgeable, you want to learn about Darien and how it works, you want to know where the money's spent, run for the representative town meeting and get involved. The door's open.
Yes, I would only say that when you think about people's engagement, that a lot of the engagement that I see is at the national level of politics, right? Everybody's got a strong opinion for or against the president, or they've got some issue like climate change or foreign policy or whatever that they're passionate about, and so you see people engage in that a lot more regularly, and I think it's because obviously there's a lot more media attention for that, there's a lot more material that you can read, so it's just a lot easier to do. The more you get into local government, at a town level, I think we have a certain amount of engagement here, and I would agree that there's a fair bit of interest, certainly in the stuff that I do, not as much as the Board of Education, but I get lots of calls and questions about stuff that's going on for our board. The area where it's a little scary for me, to be quite honest, is engagement at state level politics, right? This stuff really matters. I mean, you can talk about federal elections and Donald Trump all you want. What really matters, and is really going to be important to what you're trying to preserve here in terms of your quality of education and quality of life, let alone low taxes, all the things that we all moved here for, let's be clear, there is a far greater menace for that at the state level than there is at the federal Donald Trump level or at the local level by people who are your neighbors and you know, okay? We're happy to talk about this all day, but I'm telling you right now, if you were to encourage, if you yourself, or you wanted to encourage someone, what I would encourage you to do is to start to get more informed about what's going on at the state and get engaged on that. Those elections really matter. The decisions being made in Hartford really, really matter. Please pay attention to that and encourage your friends and neighbors to do the same.
Best way to do that is follow the Connecticut Mirror and the Hartford Current. You can get daily dispatches from both of those media organizations, and they have great updates. You won't find any print media on it, but you have to follow it through their websites and online subscriptions.
Yep, CT Mirror, fantastic.
Yep.
Balanced, nonpartisan, terrific. So read that stuff, get informed, and pick up the phone, start calling when you see something you don't like.
even on what I do for our board, and I agree with these guys. I mean, I personally think that Darien's run really well, and that's why a lot of people move here. Every young person I know that lives in Brooklyn Heights or Manhattan wants to start a family. This is the town they pick. I think it's a very well-run town, and I think these guys watch everything they have. But even on the state level, Darien, in terms of real estate and commercial district, is different from New Canaan and Greenwich. Our main street goes east-west. Greenwich Avenue goes north-south, and it's pedestrian friendly. It's not on a main drive. Westchester is the same way, and New Canaan's the same way. We want to make our town more walking friendly. We're trying to get crosswalks to go from 1020 across the street to Kermie and Company. To get a crosswalk painted in a road, you need state approval. It blows my mind. You want to have traffic calming in town, and the state will even let you calm the traffic so people can walk through the more freely. That's the part that matters. Other people fight those fights for us. Thank you.
So just a fun fact to share and shout, there are over 300 town volunteers involved in our town government. So there is, I guess, a pretty significant level of engagement beyond what you've heard from the panelists tonight. Yes.
Just also something on the Jimmy that talk about. Very excited about next year's our 200th anniversary of Darien.
Yes.
People don't realize that.
Not only is it the town of Darien's bicentennial, and there's a committee busy working on that, but the more I hear, there are other organizations that are having very significant birthdays and celebrations. So I think it couldn't be better. I mean, it's a marketing company's dream that our bicentennial is in the year 2020, because not only do we get to look back and celebrate where we've come from, we get to look forward. And you've heard from Steve tonight about some pretty amazing things that are happening in the town of Darien. And I can assure you from my reach statewide, we are unique right now. This is a place where businesses want to come, families want to come. So it's very, very exciting, and we look forward to a year-long celebration.
And Alan, the library has a birthday,
Yes.
right? 125?
This year is
Yes.
our 125th anniversary.
So lots of birthdays.
So we'll let that spill over into 2020 and continue to celebrate the library.
We're celebrating our birthday here at the library in May.
Yes.
Perfect.
I'm sorry?
100 years of the League of Women Voters in 2020.
Oh,
Oh,
so 100 years of the League of Women Voters in 2020. So, not seeing or having any more questions, I just want to make one quick announcement before we wrap up. This is a public service announcement. The Theater 308 at Darien High School is putting on a performance of Chicago, and there are still 2 nights that you can see it if you so choose. The 29th and 30th of March, all performances are at 7 o'clock, and you can buy your tickets online on the Darien High School website. So thank you very much to all the panelists who came out this evening after what we now understand has been a very long day for all 5 of you. So thank you so much. Thank you for all you do for our town. And thank you to our audience for joining us this evening. It's great to have an engaged and interested group of people who want to learn more about what's happening in town government. So on behalf of the League of Women Voters, thank you all and have a good night.